So what we need to do is just show this movie to, a bunch of people just like you and just send them over to the Middle East.
I don't know if I'm a great fighter, man. I think movie reviewing is kind of like my calling. So, yeah,
okay.
Anyways, great action, pretty good story. I mean, I gave this a 4.5.
I agree. It definitely deserves a 4.5.
Right.
This was one of the greatest movies I've seen so far this year, if not in the past few years, because there hasn't been that much out in the past few years. So, great work. Mm-hmm. I encourage you, if it's still in theaters, go see it in theaters, because the TV screen, your little 17-inch just isn't going to do it.
Exactly. So if you're not going to buy it, wait till one of your friends with a big TV has it.
Excellent. So we'll move on to the next one.
All right, which is the bucket list?
The Bank Job, I believe.
Oh, The Bank Job, okay.
The Bank Job. And this one. I have lots to say about this one. Not many good things, really. I went into this movie expecting, an action thriller as Jason.
It's Jason Statham, right? Yeah.
Statham, yeah. He's a transporter. He's done all these Italian job. He was this great actor, and he does all these great action stuff. And I was expecting that. And
so was there kung fu in the movie?
A little bit, but not too much, because unfortunately the first 30 minutes I had a hard time sitting through because I felt like I was in a porn theater.
Was there kung fu in the porn?
No, that's
okay.
It was all these. It starts off with this elaborate sex scene, and I'm just like, why? And it's all setting up this story, but I don't know if it was done quite right to set it up, because you go from a sex scene to a strip club to a whorehouse, and it's just. This fills up the first 30 minutes of the film, and
I don't think Britain's really like that.
I was like, well, this is Britain in the 70s.
Oh, okay, maybe it was.
It's dealing with corruption, because you see a lot of political leaders in these places, and they're getting their photos taken. The photos become important later, as they are stored in this bank that Jason Statham gets hired to go and rob. And it does the classic robbery of a bank where they buy a store 2 doors down from the bank, and they drill underneath and come up in the vaults. And that part is really cool. Once they get to the bank job and the whole conspiracy stuff, the movie picks up a lot.
And this is based on a true story, right?
It is based on a true story, which I don't know if that's some of their excuses for using some of the techniques they did at the beginning. It's a fairly okay bank movie, but we've seen it before. Sitting there thinking, I've seen this in a cartoon somewhere, where they drill underneath the bank, come up in the vault. You've seen that before. It was nothing new, which that's the way it happened in the 70s. That's fine. He's surrounded by a mediocre supporting cast. I do love the British accents, because he has a very strong accent. If you ever heard him in interviews and stuff, that's his natural accent. And so he was able to use that and really, take his acting to another level, and it was, for the most part, the bank scene was great, but before and after, and there's a lot of loose ends in this movie. Like 2 of the people on his team die, and we don't know why. We see them get killed, and we don't know who killed them, why they killed them. We just don't know, and so it's really confusing to follow. The only part that I could fully follow and comprehend what was going on was the actual bank job, when they were robbing the bank. The setup for the bank job and the actual robbery itself. After that, I got really confused, and I was totally lost as to what was going on. And even before that, when they were doing the setup, it was really hard to follow. You saw all these corrupt people, and you figured all this stuff magically ended up in this bank. And because that's why they got hired, because they wanted that specific box. The government wanted what was in that box, and so it was really confusing to follow. And
sex, bank robbery, and confusion. I mean, it sounds like a guy movie.
I guess that's the demographic they were going after, but even for me, it's rough, and I can put up with fairly a lot. But this was one of those movies I almost got up and walked out.
And I was wondering, why Jason Statham was in this, and because if you think about it, he was in this movie, right, which is The Bank Job. He was in The Italian Job. And he's coming up in a new flick called The Brazilian Job. So maybe it's just like the Job movies that he's got to do.
Well, The Brazilian Job is a sequel to The Italian Job.
Okay.
So that one's going to have Mark Wahlberg back in it. It's going to have the cast from that movie. And that one I'm actually looking forward to, because that was a good cast, very good storyline. So, and the same director's coming on. So that one's gonna be the same kind of quality as the Italian Job. That's what we thought. This one was gonna be another one like that, but we were thrown for a loop. The comedy just wasn't there. It was very dry humor. I guess maybe going after the British humor, but it didn't even get to me. And I like a lot of British humor. So. I just couldn't give this one very high rating at all. I actually put it on the Shatner scale because that intro is so rough, and I did see people walking out, and I almost got out, and I hardly ever walk out of a movie. So it was that rough that I gave it 2 Shatners because it's that bad. Be warned, when you go see this, the first 30 minutes is really rough. So if you're going to watch this, I recommend renting it and watching it in a house. Because
I think that you're making a good point here. To any future filmmakers out there, learn from this. A bad sex scene will screw your film over. Remember Enemy at the Gates?
Yeah.
Great movie, but dude,
well,
that was bad.
It's sometimes necessary to go as far as you go. Mm-hmm. I mean, if it has a point to the story, it's fine. Yeah. But do it tastefully and do it to where, you don't have to show us, boobs and boobs and boobs. I don't need to see that to get the point. And that's all I felt like I was watching. It was horrible. And I was almost ashamed to be there, and that's hard for me to do.
Gotcha. Well, Enemy at the Gates, I was just ashamed to watch because it looked like Rachel Weisz was just about to die in the process, and she didn't look happy, man. That was a face of fear. And that's not how.
What got me about that scene?
That's not what sex is supposed to be.
I remember that scene, and what got me about it is they were doing it in a bunker with 120 other men sitting there, supposedly sleeping, and just how are you gonna sleep through that, really?
I wonder if you would notice if I put my finger here. But anyways, so. It's not on our list. We're not going to review that, and we've got a PSA to get to.
Yes, we do have a PSA to get to, so don't go anywhere. We have the DVD giveaway coming up, as well as 2 more reviews. So.
All right. See you guys after the break.
Hey, and welcome back to See or Not to See. As you may have noticed, my jacket is no longer here. Apparently, it was creating some confusion with the microphone, so I had to take it off.
Plus it's hot anyways. I mean, the lights. Yeah.
And I saw $1 bills coming out when I. So.
Thank you, Kat. All right. So anyways, are we asking the question now, or are we just going on?
Well, let's go on with the list. The question is for the end.
Oh, okay.
So they have to watch our entire show to win this movie.
That's right. And if they're on YouTube, they can fast forward, but they won't be able to participate.
That's right. Anyway, the bucket list, starring Jack Nicholson and Morgan Freeman. I saw this, and it was actually fairly decent.
Okay, this is the new Morgan Freeman movie.
This is the new Morgan Freeman movie. This is where he is...
he's a narrator. At some point in the movie, he's got to be a narrator. Tell me he's a narrator.
It starts out with him narrating.
Okay, yes.
And he is... And it starts out, beginning, you think he's telling the story as a memory, which he technically is. You see this guy walking up a high mountain. We don't know exactly what mountain it is. And he's carrying something, and we assume it's Morgan Freeman just because the narrator comes on at the same time. But it turns out it's not, and I'll tell you about that later. Turns out he is an auto mechanic who gets diagnosed with cancer, and he's bedridden and given 6 months to a year to live. And his hospital roommate, Jack Nicholson's character, owns the hospital as well as the healthcare company, and he is and he is also given 6 months to a year to live. He first complains. And there's a quote from the movie. He says, "I want my own room," and they quote one of his own rules: 2 beds to a room, no exceptions. So this is a whole. This sets up the character development and how he's going to grow as a character throughout this movie. But he develops a sort of friendship with Morgan Freeman's character, and they create this bucket list. Things you want to do before you kick the bucket. Clever name. And so they decide to be ambitious and go and do these things. Edward Cole's, Nicholson's character, paying the bill. He's saying, money is not an object, I can afford it. And they grow together, but they also grow individually, character-wise.